Two rival rallies and one senior military defection. Venezuelans are taking stock of Saturday's dramatic developments. This 10 days after Juan Guaidó declared himself interim president. The Australian government says there'll soon be no more children held in detention camps in the Pacific. This as the last remaining 4 are accepted by the United States. And a peace deal is struck between the government of the Central African Republic and 14 armed groups. It's hoped that deal will end 5 years of interreligious violence. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. First, rival rallies were held in the Venezuelan capital on Saturday. One was headed up by Juan Guaidó, who 10 days ago declared himself the country's interim president. And he used the gathering to demand that the socialist leader Nicolás Maduro step down. Well, for his part, Maduro ignored that demand and instead, at his rally, he celebrated the 20th anniversary of his predecessor, Hugo Chavez, taking office. Well, the United States and some other regional powers recognize Guaidó as the country's interim leader, and Britain, France, Germany and Spain say that unless Maduro announces presidential elections by midnight tonight, they're going to do the same. Well, one of Saturday's other major events was the defection of a general in the Venezuelan Air Force. Well, events in Venezuela are being watched across the globe, notably in cities with a sizable Venezuelan community, such as Miami. Well, a France 24 team there went to find out more.
A transitional government and free elections. Those are the demands of the thousands of exiles who have gathered here to demonstrate near Miami, a city that hosts the largest Venezuelan population in the United States. Among the demonstrators are political leaders and former military personnel who oppose the Maduro government. They said they have been forced to leave Venezuela for security reasons.
We came here mainly because the United States is a country of freedom, the champion of democracy. It respects human rights. It's the best country to seek political asylum because their judicial system protects us.
The demonstrators have thanked President Donald Trump for being the first head of state to formally recognize Juan Guaidó as the interim president of Venezuela. The atmosphere here is clearly very festive as people come to celebrate and shout the slogan, justice and freedom. It is clear they have one desire: to return to Venezuela because they are no longer afraid, but they are hopeful.
I would like to be with my brothers and sisters, to be able to take them in my arms and tell them that even though we left, they were never alone. We are here and we will continue to fight until Venezuela is free.
Since 2015, there have been more than 2 million Venezuelans who have reportedly been exiled, and 1/4 of them now reside in the United States, a country that has so far been welcoming but has an increasingly restrictive migration policy.
In other news, the Australian government says there'll soon be no children left at detention camps on the Pacific island of Nauru. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the last 4 asylum seeker children in the Australian-run camps will go to the United States. Well, according to their immigration policy, people intercepted at sea trying to reach Australia are sent to camps in the Pacific, and they cannot then be settled in Australian territory. France 24's Camille Nedelec has this update.
A detention camp is no place for a child, but refugee children have lived on Nauru for almost 6 years. Some were even born here.
Over the past 5 months, we have been working quietly and methodically to remove children from Nauru. Today, there are only 4 children on Nauru, and they will all shortly resettle permanently in the United States. Our government has got the children off Nauru.
But those comments were met with anger at the Australian government's record by NGOs and activists on social media.
We have had to fight Peter Dutton in court cases going back to 2016 to force him to get the kids off Nauru. Many of them were taken off Nauru in a catatonic state after 6 years on an island prison. Hardly a moment of glory for Scott Morrison.
The camps have been criticised by the United Nations and human rights groups who fear for the children's welfare.
Amongst the children, they were presenting with depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we were seeing suicide attempts in children as young as 9 years old.
All asylum seekers trying to reach the country illegally, including children, are sent to camps in Papua New Guinea and Nauru. Even people later confirmed to be refugees are not granted leave to remain in Australia, but instead are settled elsewhere.
Now, the governor of the US state of Virginia is refusing to step down after a photograph deemed to be racist surfaced of him in a decades-old yearbook. Well, on Friday, Ralph Norther apologised for the offensive picture, but the governor now says he doesn't think it's him in the photograph at all. Here's what he said.
I recognize that many people will find this difficult to believe. The photo appears with others I submitted on a page with my name on it. That same year, I did participate in a dance contest in San Antonio, in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. I look back now and regret that I did not understand the harmful legacy of an action like that. It is because my memory of that episode is so vivid that I truly do not believe I am in the picture in my yearbook. You remember these things.
The governor of Virginia speaking there. Now, the United Nations and the African Union announced on Saturday that a peace deal has been struck between the government of the Central African Republic and 14 armed groups. That's after they held direct talks in the Sudanese capital with the goal of ending what's been 5 years of interreligious and intercommunal fighting, which has claimed the lives of thousands of people and left at least 640,000 others displaced. France 24's Zigoto Chaya has more now from Bongi.
It is important to point out that the armed groups were asking for a general amnesty and were very insistent on the creation of a new government with a new prime minister appointed by the rebels. Therefore, it is not very clear at this stage what the final peace agreement has been concluded. While waiting for the details of the peace agreement here in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, the population welcomes this peace agreement with some concerns.
Personally, I hope that this agreement will be shared by all three parties. No one should be left out. The debate or the agreement shouldn't go only in the government or the armed group's way, but also include the victims. So they'll need to find one single agreement for peace to finally be achieved. Once again, the government, the armed groups and the victims, all three must be considered.
It should be recalled that this is the 8th peace agreement signed since the beginning of the crisis in the Central African Republic in 2013. One can imagine that the population is going to monitor very closely the content of this peace agreement in the coming days.
Now, the authorities here in France are trying to trace any remaining beef from a batch imported from Poland, where cows, believed to have been in poor health, were butchered and their meat was sold regardless. While some butchers and restaurants here in the Paris area are known to have been affected. France 24's Alexander Ocott tells us more.
This high-end Parisian butcher still has a long line out of the door, despite the scandal surrounding suspect Polish beef. Although the case has made customers pay even more attention to where they buy from.
I hope I didn't buy any suspect meat, although I'm sure they wouldn't sell it here.
I try to know where the meats come from, so I go to a butcher who supplies his own produce, and I mostly buy organic.
Of almost 800 kilograms of suspect Polish beef imported to France, the Agriculture Ministry says 500 kilos has already been seized and destroyed. 150 kilos was sold by butchers, while almost the same amount again was recently found in wholesalers and restaurants. This award-winning butcher says where the meat comes from is what's most important.
French customers can start worrying from the moment they decide to eat foreign meat. But if you eat French meat, there's no risk. It's that simple. After this, it's perhaps for the European Union to ask the right questions.
The French Farmers' Union is up in arms about the scandal. Its director says she's revolted that this kind of thing can still happen. The export of diseased beef came to light on Friday, after a journalist worked undercover in an abattoir in northeast Poland. With his hidden camera, he filmed sick cows being dragged to the slaughter and the meat ready for sale despite containing abscesses. In total, some 2.7 tons of suspect meat was exported to 13 EU nations.
Now, as the Pope enjoys the warmth of the Middle East, where he's due to arrive in a couple of hours, here in Europe, some of his brethren are following in the tracks of one of the pontiff's predecessors, Pope John Paul II, who was an avid skier. So much so that he has an annual ski contest named after him. France 24's Brian Quinn tells us all about it.
The sign of the cross and a short prayer before heading down the mountain. An obligatory ritual for the clumsier skier. But these are no nervous beginners. They're Catholic priests, and they're experts on the slope. For the past 22 years, the Pope John Paul II ski competition has been held here in Wisła, Poland.
This activity has a connection to our spiritual practice. We have priests, Franciscans, monks, believers who every day through such recreation show how they live by their faith.
The Polish-born John Paul II was himself an avid skier, earning the nickname the Daredevil of the Tatras for the Polish mountain range he frequented, and continuing the sport until his health precluded it. The competition that bears his name was initially for clergy only, with priests split into 4 age groups. Lay members can now join as well in the competition based around an 800-meter slalom race. Seminarians compete in a separate category. After the opening run, their cassocks are traded in for full ski suits, with the winners in each category taking home the John Paul II Cup.
That's not a sight you see every day. Priests are on skis there. Now, at the start of this year, the Italian government launched a new tax scheme which aims to attract foreign retirees to live in southern regions of the country, specifically to live in towns and villages with a dwindling population. France 24's Natalia Mendoza takes us to find out more.
A sun-soaked paradise, nestled in the mountains in the south of Italy. And yet, the village of Cianciana in Sicily, like many others in this region, has lost a third of its population within the last 15 years.
We suffer from rural depopulation. People leave the town, especially young people. Our town is losing its residents because of the lack of opportunities.
The village's mayor is enthusiastic about the recent initiative of the Italian government to attract retirees from all over the world. Derek and Deanne are from the UK. They have decided to settle here full-time.
With our 2 pensions from England, we can live a better life in Sicily than we could expect in England. Things have changed, but we can live here very comfortably, whereas in England on the same pension we might not be so well off.
Since January, foreigners like Derek and Deanne can benefit from reduced taxes in Italy. They will be paying only 7% on their pensions from abroad.
It's the whole package of a tranquil life. We are looked after very well by the government systems in Italy, healthcare, etc. It's just so, we are so relaxed that we have moved to this country.
For the locals, the arrival of foreign pensioners is a godsend.
Here half the village is abandoned. They live in previously abandoned houses. It's good for the town.
When they settle here, they boost the population, they buy things and stimulate the village economy.
Unlike in Portugal, expat retirees in southern Italy do not need to purchase property to benefit from the tax advantages. They simply need to live in a village of less than 20,000 inhabitants for at least 6 months of the year.
Some ideas there for retirement. And finally, the Egyptian authorities have unveiled more than 40 mummies, which date back more than 2,000 years. Amongst them are children and animals, all of which are described as being in a good condition. The graves, which were discovered about 250 kilometres south of Cairo, are thought to have been those of a well-heeled family. Well, archaeologists say that the presence of mummified pets, most of them dogs, show just how important dogs were for families at the time. Well, that's where we leave you. Thanks for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.